Well, our trusted Bilderberg sleuth, Jim Tucker, has discovered and confirmed the city it is to be in Spain. He'll be joining us coming up in the next hour. For the next 25 minutes, Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Shaffer is our guest. And you can check out the website, c4ads.org. He's got a new book coming out very soon. That's going to have a lot of new revealing information about how the Army was stopped from killing bin Laden and other senior leadership of al-Qaeda in the months and weeks before 9/11. And, of course, when he tried to testify in closed session to Congress about this, he later got persecuted for it, but that was proven to be a fraud. And so he's with us today. Look, Colonel, they can say that this is the rules of war, people get killed, it's a war zone, but you talk about adrenaline, it's something more than that. Because, you know, I've seen old gun pod footage of fighter pilots in Vietnam. They weren't giggling and snickering and you know, of this bloodlust. And we see footage of some of the troops. It's a minority, you know, getting off on shooting dogs or throwing dogs off cliffs. They've 2, 3, 4 tours, something a military's never been forced to do. You know, some of these guys are coming back and are completely bonkers. But I think for the average citizen to see these gun pod footage shows them what is an everyday, you know, thing going on out there, and the way people are now disconnected from what soldiers for thousands of years have faced, killing their enemy right up, looking them in the eyes. And we see the ground troops show up, and they show empathy for the children that are in the minivan that's been shot to hell. And then you hear the helicopter pilot and the gunner say, I shouldn't be in a war zone. And so we see not just the people on the ground being dehumanized, but we see the people in the helicopters being dehumanized.
Well, I agree with you, and this is one of those things where, again, if I were the commander and I witnessed that, those soldiers would have been relieved on the spot, because I said, that is exactly the point. All combat, especially the people I've been in combat with, do not conduct themselves in that manner. Anytime you have to take a life, you need to be reverent in the fact that you are doing it. And as you mentioned, my book, The Dark Side of the Force, is coming out later this year, in last day of August. And, you know, one of the first incidents in that book I talk about, my first combat convoy, I have to make a choice about shooting or not shooting an 8-year-old kid who throws a Sun Juice empty box in front of the vehicle in front of me. And I would have been right to shoot the kid by the rules of engagement, but I didn't. And this is one of those things that was a win-win for the Taliban. If I shot the kid, that's good, because, you know, we shot a kid, and that's a score for them. And if I didn't shoot him, that makes me less likely to shoot a kid next time if he does have a bomb in his hand. So this is the nature of modern warfare. It's one of those things where there's no right answers, but if you pick the wrong answer, it's going to be hurtful no matter what. And let's not kid ourselves. This is a war of images, a war of information. And, you know, you have Infowars.com. That is a brilliant way of displaying information relating to what is really going on. This is one of those things, Alex, we have to be better than the adversary. If you recall, the Taliban came out with a 29-point code of conduct last year, done by al-Badr, who was actually wrapped up recently because he became too pro-negotiating for his own good with the Pakistanis. So we will never see the Taliban actually execute their operations in conjunction with that 69-point code of conduct. This is where we're better than they are. And frankly, this is one of the points I'd like to say. I'm not speaking for the Army, but the Army and the DOD is actually going to relook this now, because it's the right thing to do. We need to look at the circumstance of why was it the soldiers were so apt to shoot that day. Clearly, it's not only a training issue, it's a psychological issue. And let's not forget, Alex, that we have record number of suicides from post-traumatic stress. I think this is why you're seeing such a great number of post-traumatic stress issues, because people are not doing the right thing necessarily. Commanders are obligated to train, equip their soldiers to win, but then also they're responsible for holding them back, because, as you point out, through our history, we have been better than this. We're obligated to try to pull people back. And we also had Vietnam. We had the My Lai massacre. So we have had a record of people going off the reservation. I'd like to believe that's the exception, but we've got to be better about the way we conduct modern warfare, because things like this do matter, and it shapes the al-Qaeda battle space. This video will help al-Qaeda recruit, and we both know that.
Okay, let's expand on this, though. Take a movie like Apocalypse Now with Colonel Kurtz, who's gone completely insane. and so the military sends out a special operator, to kill him.
Captain Willard, right.
But now I read John Yoo memos, I read Alberto Gonzalez memos, guys that have never been in the military, never been in combat, and they're saying we can crush children's genitals, we can torture children. The military's given this. The Pentagon hires jail guards and people who've been fired from federal jails for abuse. General Tagumbu's own report says raping children, raping people with acid. I mean, this is in the Army report. Far worse than those images. Why on earth would the Pentagon accept directives from the Bush White House, knowing that once this was implemented, this would absolutely destroy morale and turn us into the Nazis in the eyes of the world?
Well, I think that's the answer. The answer to your question is within your question. I think a lot of those policies were established for retribution more than actual intelligence collection. The Army put out a policy a few years ago saying we will follow a very strict regimen of basically techniques, non-intrusive, non-violent techniques to break people. Again, I cite for you my book. There's 2 chapters about an FBI special agent and I working to interrogate and break. I mean, we didn't touch him once, but within 3 days we were able to break him by use of really good investigative and interrogation techniques. And I think, based on my experience, you can get people to talk. You don't have to touch them. You don't have to torture them. But and a lot of times, as you know, their mind becomes their own worst enemy because of the imagery of their own fears. You can touch on people's fears without touching them. And that's the idea here. We need to be better and more instructive in how we have people do that.
Well, let's take Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He confessed after 100-plus waterboardings. They finally threatened his family. They finally said, well, something bad's going to happen to your kids and wife if you don't. He confessed to bombing buildings that weren't built till 4 years after he was arrested. He almost confessed to sinking the Titanic or killing Kennedy. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, and I think this brings up an excellent problem for the prosecutions we're now going to face for the 9/11 terrorists, the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, which is similar to anybody who has something to do with 9/11 regarding the techniques you just mentioned. Anytime you torture someone, Alex, the fact is this: they're going to tell you whatever you want to know to make the pain stop. And that's been proven over and over again. So, again, it's one of those things where I think there were some other very advanced techniques. One of the 9/11 conspirators were broken by very complex techniques relating to the fact that he was a pedophile. So in this one instance, they used the idea that his personal conduct was directly in contrast and contradiction to his personal beliefs relating to Allah and his faith. So enough of hitting him on that, not hitting him literally, but hitting him with the idea of the disconnect between his personal conduct and his personal beliefs is what broke him eventually. And this is the idea. You need to get inside these people's head, these individuals' head, and break them without touching them. So when you look at the interrogation program, I personally turned down a seat in that program. I talk about that a little bit in my book, about being given a tour of one of the secret prisons and then saying, I've been asked, what do you think? It's like, look, I basically said, just to read ahead in the book here, I want nothing to do with this. And frankly, that's the problem. I think when you have a policy set up by an administration, Alex, the Army or the military is obligated to follow it. And that's one of those things where you have lawyers, hopefully lawyers who are smart enough to understand that you can't arbitrarily decide to start breaking U.S. laws. And I frankly read the memos done by the Bush White House lawyers as being illegal, approving illegal activities, which frankly, we as soldiers are obligated to try to resist illegal orders. And you were told that in your training. It is your obligation to not follow illegal orders. It becomes a very fine line between following orders which are given by lawful authority, which we're trained to do, or trying to find a way to not follow or disabuse yourself of illegal orders.
Well, I mean, you just talked about it being illegal, and clearly it is illegal on the face of it and immoral.
Yes.
But now we have Obama continuing snatch and grab. More black sites have been exposed all over Europe and Asia. We know this is intensifying, not subsiding. And so I guess they got away with it. So now it's secret policy in the CIA.
Speaking as an academic, every administration who comes in tends to take on the tools which the previous administration used and were successful in using. So frankly, I don't believe there's going to be any great difference between the Bush White House and the Obama administration on a number of these policy issues. And let's cite, for example, Alex, the kill capture program. I've said on Fox News a couple different times recently that the Obama administration's their default position is killing people, and that's something I find totally idiotic as an intelligence officer. The idea is you need to capture people and find out what they know. So because they don't want to deal with the issues relating to what do we do with detainees, do we put them on trial in a civilian court, do we do military tribunals, because they don't want to deal with that, now the default position is killing people, which you've read about recently with the issue of al-Awlaki. Apparently, according to the news reports over the past 2 weeks, there is now essentially a death warrant been issued for him to be killed, if possible, by U.S. or Yemeni forces on site.